They called her the Phantom of Derbyshire. Whispers in the London ballrooms claimed her face was so twisted by illness that mirrors shattered in her presence. And Sebastian St. Clair, the desperate Duke of Blackwood, believed every word. He didn't care about her face. He only cared about her dowry. He walked into that cathedral expecting to shackle himself to a monster to save his estate. But when he lifted that veil, the air didn't just leave his lungs. It left the room. She wasn't a monster. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And in that precise second, as her cold blue eyes met his, Sebastian realized the terrifying truth: he hadn't just saved his fortune. He had just signed his death warrant, because the woman standing before him knew exactly what he had said about her, and she was going to make him pay for it with everything he had left. October 12th, 1884. London. The rain in London didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Sebastian Street. Claire IX, Duke of Blackwood, stood by the window of his study, watching the soot-streaked water run down the glass. At 32, Sebastian was a man who looked like he had everything: broad shoulders, a jawline sharp enough to cut paper, and the kind of brooding dark charisma that made debutantes whisper behind their fans. But the truth was far uglier. He was destitute. "The bank will foreclose on Blackwood Manor by the end of the month, Your Grace," the family solicitor, Mr. Thaddeus Moore, said from the desk. His voice was dry like rust. "Unless, of course, the nuptials proceed as planned." Sebastian took a sip of brandy. It was 11 a.m. "You mean the sale?" Sebastian corrected, turning to face the lawyer. "Let us not call it a marriage, Thaddeus. It insults the institution. I am selling my title to a merchant's daughter, and he is buying a ducal coronet for his damaged goods." "Lady Vivian is the daughter of the Earl of Carlisle," Thaddeus corrected gently. "Hardly a merchant." "The Earl is new money," Sebastian sneered, "and the daughter is unseen." That was the crux of it. Lady Vivian Carlisle. The Phantom. She had not been seen in London society since she was a child. The rumors were vicious. Some said a fire in the nursery had melted half her face. Others whispered of a pox that left her skin pitted like the moon. She was 24, an old maid by society's standards, and hidden away in the countryside. The Earl of Carlisle had offered a dowry that was astronomical. £50,000 immediately, and the restoration of the Blackwood estates. In exchange, Sebastian simply had to marry the girl and make her a duchess. "I have the settlement papers here," Thaddeus said, sliding a heavy parchment across the mahogany desk. Sebastian stared at it. He thought of his mistress Isabella. Beautiful, fiery, greedy Isabella. She was waiting for him in a townhouse in Chelsea, a townhouse he could no longer afford. She had told him last night, tracing the scar on his chest. "Marry the monster, darling. Park her in the country. Come back to me rich. It's done all the time." It was a cold, pragmatic plan. "Does she speak?" Sebastian asked, picking up the quill. "I'm told she is educated," Thaddeus said, hesitating. "But I must warn you, Your Grace. The Earl was specific. You are not to see her until the ceremony. He claims she is sensitive about her appearance." Sebastian let out a dark, humorless laugh. "Sensitive? That means she's hideous, Thaddeus. Just say it." He dipped the quill in the ink. The black liquid pooled like oil. "Let her be a gorgon," Sebastian muttered, scrawling his signature with aggressive strokes. I plan to spend the rest of my life looking at the bottom of a bottle or at Isabella's ceiling. I don't need to look at my wife." He threw the pen down. It splattered ink onto the pristine rug. "Done. Tell the Earl he has his duke, and tell him I expect the first installment of the dowry deposited by noon tomorrow." Sebastian walked out of the room, grabbing his coat. He needed a drink. He needed to forget that he had just sold his soul for a pile of bricks and mortar. He didn't know it then, but the ink on that page was sealing a fate far worse than bankruptcy. He was expecting a burden. He had no idea he was inviting a storm. November 1st, 1884. St. George's, Hanover Square. The church smelled of damp wool and lilies, the scent of funerals and weddings. To Sebastian there was no difference. The pews were packed. London society had turned out in droves not to wish the couple well, but to gawk. They were vultures circling a carcass, desperate to catch a glimpse of the ugly bride. The whispers were a physical weight in the air. "I heard she wears a mask," a dowager whispered in the front row. "I heard she lacks a nose," a young dandy replied, snickering. Sebastian stood at the altar, his back rigid. He was hung over. His head throbbed in time with the organ music. He wore his finest black coat, the Order of the Garter, pinned to his chest, looking every inch the regal duke. Inside he felt like a fraud. Beside him stood his best man, Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Steady on, Bass," Arthur whispered. "It's almost over. Just think of the money." "I'm thinking of the whiskey I'm going to drink the moment we leave the vestry," Sebastian murmured back, not bothering to lower his voice much. God, listen to them. They're taking bets on how hideous she is. "Keep your voice down," Arthur hissed, glancing at the heavy oak doors. "Why?" Sebastian sneered. His patience, frayed by debt and alcohol, snapped. "Let's not pretend this is a love match, Arthur. I am marrying a recluse with a face that frightens children to pay off my father's gambling debts. She gets a title. I get to keep my roof. It is a business transaction. I don't care if she looks like a toad, as long as her check clears." The organ swelled. The doors groaned open. The congregation went silent. Even the breathing seemed to stop. At the end of the long aisle stood the bride. She was small. That was the first thing Sebastian noticed. She was swathed in so much lace and silk that she looked like a doll wrapped for shipping. But it was the veil that drew every eye. It was thick, heavy Brussels lace, opaque and stifling. It covered her entirely, draping over her head and shoulders, obscuring her face completely. She walked alone. Her father, the Earl, was supposedly too ill to travel another lie, Sebastian assumed. The Earl probably couldn't bear the shame of presenting her. She moved slowly, but not with hesitation. There was a strange, gliding grace to her movements. As she approached the altar, the silence stretched heavy and awkward. Sebastian didn't step forward to help her up the stairs. He stood his ground, his face a mask of bored indifference. He wanted everyone to know he was here under duress. She reached his side. She smelled unexpected. He anticipated the smell of medicine or perhaps stale lavender. Instead, she smelled of winter rain and night-blooming jasmine. Clean, sharp, intoxicating. The vicar cleared his throat, looking nervous. "Dearly beloved." Sebastian tuned it out. He stared straight ahead at the crucifix, refusing to look at the woman beside him. He could feel her presence, though. It was heavy, silent, and imposing. "Do you, Sebastian Alexander St. Clair, take this woman?" "I do," Sebastian said, cutting the vicar off. He wanted this over. "And do you, Vivienne Marie Carlyle?" There was a pause. A long, agonizing pause. Sebastian finally turned his head to look at the heap of lace beside him. Is she crying? He wondered. Is she having a fit? "I do." Her voice was low. It wasn't the shrill, nervous squeak of a spinster. It was a contralto, smooth, rich, and terrifyingly calm. It sent a bizarre shiver down Sebastian's spine. "Then by the power vested in me," the vicar rushed the words, sensing the tension, "you may kiss the bride." This was the moment of truth, the moment the vultures had come for. Sebastian turned to her. He reached out his gloved hands, trembling slightly, not from emotion, but from the alcohol withdrawal. He took the hem of the heavy lace veil. "Let's get this over with," he muttered loud enough for her to hear. He lifted the veil. He braced himself for the scars. He braced himself for the pity he would have to fake. He braced himself for the gasp of the crowd. The veil fell back over her tiara. The gasp did come, but it wasn't a gasp of horror. It was a collective intake of breath, a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. Sebastian's heart hammered against his ribs. He blinked. He blinked again. The woman staring back at him was not scarred. She was not pitted. She was not a monster. She was perfection. Pale porcelain skin without a blemish. High aristocratic cheekbones that looked like they had been carved from marble. Lips the color of crushed berries. And eyes of such a piercing, crystalline blue that they looked like chips of ice. She was arguably the most beautiful woman London had seen in a decade. Sebastian stood frozen, his hands hovering in the air, his brain short-circuited. The rumors, the seclusion, the veil. Why he felt a flush of heat rise up his neck. He felt confused, and then immediately he felt a surge of relief. She's beautiful. I've won. I have the money, and I have a prize. A slow, charming smile, the smile that had seduced 100 women, spread across his face. He leaned in his confidence, roaring back. "Well," Sebastian whispered, his voice dripping with sudden charm, "it seems the rumors were exaggerated. You are quite lovely, my dear." He leaned in to kiss her, expecting her to melt, expecting her to be grateful that the Duke found her acceptable. She didn't move. She didn't blink. As his face neared hers, she spoke. Her voice was soft, so only he could hear, but it was harder than steel. "I heard you, Your Grace." Sebastian froze inches from her lips. "Pardon." Her blue eyes bore into his, devoid of any warmth. They were the eyes of an executioner. "At the altar," she whispered. "You said I was a business transaction. You said you didn't care if I looked like a toad." She took a half step back, denying him the kiss. She turned her head slightly to the vicar, signaling the ceremony was done, leaving Sebastian leaning toward empty air, like a fool. She turned back to him, and for a fleeting second, a cruel, satisfied smirk touched the corner of her mouth. "I am the Toad Sebastian," she said, using his Christian name with a familiarity that sounded like a curse. "And you have just sold your life to me." She took his arm, her grip like an iron claw in a velvet glove, and began to walk him down the aisle. The crowd erupted into whispers, dazzled by her beauty. But Sebastian wasn't seeing the beauty anymore. He was looking at the side of her face, realizing with a sinking pit of dread that he had walked into a trap. He had expected a victim. He had married a predator, and the life he thought he was going to lead, the drinking, the mistress, the easy money just evaporated into the cold air of the church. November 1st, 1884, the carriage ride to Blackwood Manor. The heavy oak doors of the church slammed shut, sealing the newlyweds inside the ducal carriage. The vehicle lurched forward, the horses' hooves clattering violently against the cobblestones, echoing the chaotic rhythm of Sebastian's heart. Inside, the air was suffocating. Sebastian sat on the velvet bench, pressing his back against the upholstery, as if trying to merge with it. Across from him sat Vivian. She had pushed the heavy lace veil back over her elaborate hat. In the dim grey light filtering through the rain-streaked windows, she looked spectral, ethereal, and utterly terrifying. The silence between them was thick enough to choke on. Sebastian cleared his throat. He was a Saint Clair. He was charming by birthright. He could fix this. He just needed to turn on the charm that had won him half the debutantes in London. Vivian. He started, his voice dropping to a husky, intimate register. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. I must apologize for my behavior at the altar. Wedding jitters. A man says foolish things when he is nervous. Vivian didn't look at him. She was staring out the window at the passing blur of London shops. She slowly peeled off her white silk gloves, finger by finger. Nervousness implies you care, Your Grace, she said. Her voice was calm, almost melodic, but it lacked any warmth. You weren't nervous. You were bored. No, not bored. Sebastian lied smoothly. He reached out to take her bare hand. She snatched it away before he could make contact. The movement was fast, sharp, like a viper strike. Do not touch me, she said. She finally turned her gaze to him. Those blue eyes were shards of glass. Let us establish the rules of this arrangement immediately. Shall we? It will save us both the exhaustion of pretending. Sebastian straightened up, his ego bruising. Arrangement. It is a marriage, Vivian. We are husband and wife. We are partners in a business transaction. She corrected him, throwing his own words back at him. You needed money. My father needed a title in the family. That is the extent of our union. But why the veil? Sebastian burst out, frustration leaking through. Why the seclusion? Why let the world believe you were a monster? If you had known I was beautiful, you would have married me for the wrong reasons too, she interrupted. But at least you would have pretended to like me. She sighed, smoothing the silk of her skirt. My face is not scarred, Sebastian. My reputation was. Sebastian frowned. I don't understand. When I was 18, I refused a marriage proposal from a very powerful, very petty marquis. Vivian explained, her voice devoid of emotion. To punish me, he spread rumors that I was diseased, that I was disfigured. Society is a sheep pen. One sheep bleated ugly, and the rest followed. My father was too weak to fight them. So I used it. You used it. I wanted to see who would marry me. For me, she said softly. Then her gaze hardened. Or barring that, who would at least have the decency to treat a monster with kindness? You failed both tests, Sebastian. I can change, Sebastian pleaded. He was thinking of the bedroom at Blackwood Manor. He was thinking of the air he needed. He was thinking that being married to the most beautiful woman in England wouldn't be a hardship. I was a fool. Let me make it up to you. Tonight. We can start over. Vivian let out a short, dry laugh. It was a chilling sound. Tonight? She asked, arching a perfect eyebrow. Oh, Sebastian, You mistake the situation. You are not coming to my bed." "I am your husband," he demanded, his anger flaring. "I have rights." "And I have the mortgage," she countered instantly. The carriage hit a bump, jostling them, but their eyes remained locked in a duel. "I have instructed the coachman to take us to Blackwood Manor," she continued. "I will take the master suite. You will take the guest quarters in the East Wing. And after you have changed out of your wedding clothes, I suggest you go to Chelsea." Sebastian froze. The blood drained from his face. Chelsea. Vivian leaned forward, invading his personal space. She smelled of that intoxicating jasmine again, dizzying and sharp. "Yes. Cheney Walk, number 42. That is where you keep her, isn't it, Miss Isabella Vane?" Sebastian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Do not look so shocked," Vivian whispered. "Did you think I would buy a duke without inspecting the merchandise? I know about your gambling debts at the Whites Club. I know about the mortgage. And I know about the red-haired dancer you promised to run back to the moment the ring was on my finger." She sat back, looking satisfied. "Go to her, Sebastian. I don't want you here tonight. I have an estate to audit, and your presence would only be a distraction." The carriage slowed to a halt in front of the looming grey stone facade of Blackwood Manor. The footman opened the door, letting in a gust of cold, wet wind. Vivian gathered her skirts and stepped out into the rain without waiting for him. She didn't look back. Sebastian sat in the empty carriage, the smell of her perfume lingering in the air like a ghost. He felt small. He felt foolish. And for the first time in his life, the Duke of Blackwood was truly afraid. November the 15th, 1884. 2 weeks later. The novelty of freedom lasted exactly 3 days. For the first few days after the wedding, Sebastian stayed with Isabella. He drank expensive wine, he complained about his Ice Queen wife, and he slept until noon. Isabella, with her fiery hair and fiery temper, was sympathetic at first. She laughed at his stories of the veiled shrew and assured him that as long as the money kept flowing, they would be happy. But then the reality set in. It was a Tuesday morning when the illusion shattered. Sebastian was at his Club Whites, standing at the bar. He ordered a round of drinks for his friends, parasites mostly, who hung around him for his title and his wallet. "Put it on my tab," Sebastian told the barman, sliding a hand through his hair. The barman, a man named Collins, who had served Sebastian for 10 years, looked uncomfortable. He wiped a glass with a rag, avoiding eye contact. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Your Grace." The room went quiet. Sebastian laughed nervously. "Don't be daft, Collins. I'm the Duke of Blackwood. I just married the Carlisle fortune. I'm good for it." "It's not that, Your Grace," Collins murmured, leaning in so the other patrons wouldn't hear. "We received a letter this morning from the solicitor, Mr. Thaddeus Moore. All credit lines under the St. Clair name have been frozen." Sebastian felt the heat rise in his cheeks. "Frozen by whom?" "By the Duchess of Blackwood," Collins whispered. "She has instructed that all debts must be approved by her signature personally. We cannot serve you unless you pay cash, Your Grace." Humiliation, hot and sharp, pierced Sebastian's chest. He looked around. His friends were pretending not to listen, but he knew they were devouring every word. He turned on his heel and stormed out. He rode his horse hard back to Blackwood Manor. He hadn't been home in 2 weeks. He stormed through the front doors, mud flying from his boots onto the marble floor. "Where is she?" he roared at the butler, cryptic old Mr. Henderson. "Her Grace is in the morning room, sir, going over the ledgers." Sebastian threw the doors to the morning room open with a crash. It was a sunny room, usually cluttered with dust and old furniture. Now it was transformed. The heavy velvet curtains were pulled back, letting in the light. The furniture had been rearranged. It smelled of lemon polish and beeswax. The place looked alive. Vivian sat at a small desk near the window. She was wearing a dress of deep navy blue, high-necked, and severe but fitted to perfection. She didn't jump at the noise. She simply dipped her pen into an inkwell and continued writing. "You have some nerve," Sebastian shouted, marching up to the desk. He slammed his hand down on the wood. "You humiliated me at my club." Vivian finished her sentence, dotted the I, and then looked up. Her expression was one of mild curiosity, as if observing a noisy child. "I merely balanced the books, Sebastian. Something you have failed to do for a decade." "You cut off my credit." "I cut off the leak," she corrected. "Do you have any idea how much you spend on brandy and cigars? It is obscene. If we are to save this estate, which I might remind you is now my home, we cannot hemorrhage money on your vices." "It is my money," Sebastian yelled. "The dowry is legally bound to the restoration of the estate." Vivian said, her voice cutting through his shouting like a knife. She picked up a piece of paper. "Clause 14, Section B. The funds provided by the Earl of Carlisle shall be administered solely by the Duchess of Blackwood until such time as the estate is solvent." "You signed it, Sebastian. You were in such a rush to get back to your mistress, you didn't even read it." Sebastian stared at her, his mouth agape. He remembered the moment, the rain on the window, the hangover. Just say it. Let her be a gorgon. He had signed blindly. He collapsed into a chair opposite her, the fight draining out of him. He ran his hands over his face. "So what am I?" he whispered. "A prisoner." "You are a duke." Vivian said, her voice softening just a fraction, though the steel remained. "And it is time you started acting like one. I have paid off the most pressing debts. The roof is being repaired next week. The tenant farmers are finally getting the new equipment they were promised 3 years ago." She stood up and walked around the desk. She stopped in front of him. She was so close, he could see the flecks of silver in her blue eyes. "I am not your enemy, Sebastian, unless you insist on being mine." Sebastian looked up at her. She was terrifyingly competent and beautiful. God, she was beautiful. The navy dress made her skin look like alabaster. "I need money," he said, his voice hoarse. "Isabella, her rent is due." The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Vivian stepped back, her face closing off like a fortress gate. "Isabella," she repeated. The name tasted like ash in her mouth. "I have a duty to her," Sebastian argued weakly. "She has been with me for 2 years." "A duty?" Vivian laughed, a harsh sound. "You have a duty to your tenants. You have a duty to your name. You do not have a duty to a woman who helped you spend your inheritance into the ground." She walked to the bell pull and tugged it. "I will give you an allowance, Sebastian, a modest one, enough for a gentleman to buy lunch and maintain his wardrobe. But not a penny of my father's money will go to that woman in Chelsea." The butler Henderson appeared at the door. "Yes, Your Grace. His Grace will be dining at home tonight," Vivian said, not taking her eyes off Sebastian. And Henderson, "Please have the guest room in the East Wing prepared indefinitely. The Duke prefers the solitude." "Very good. Your Grace." Vivian turned back to the ledger. "You are dismissed, Sebastian." Sebastian sat there for a long moment. He wanted to scream. He wanted to flip the desk. But he knew with a sickening certainty that she held all the cards. He had thought he was marrying a simpleton, a checkbook with a pulse. Instead, he had married a general. He stood up, straightening his coat with as much dignity as he could muster. "This isn't over, Vivian," he muttered. "I know," she said without looking up. "The fun is just beginning." As Sebastian walked out into the hallway, he realized the truth. He was trapped in a golden cage, and the key hung around the neck of the woman he had insulted. But as he walked past a mirror, he saw something else in his own reflection. He didn't look like the brooding, drunken ruin he had been a month ago. He looked angry. He looked alert. For the first time in years, Sebastian St. Clair was wide awake. And he had a plan. If she wanted to play games, he would play. He would find a way to break her contract. He would find the dirt on Vivian Carlyle. Because everyone had a secret, even the perfect, icy Duchess. He would destroy her, he told himself. But deep down in a place he wouldn't admit to, a tiny voice whispered, "Or maybe, just maybe, you'll fall in love with her." He strangled that voice immediately and called for his horse. He was going to find a lawyer who could beat Clause 14 December 24th, 1884. Christmas Eve at Blackwood Manor. Winter hit Derbyshire with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Snow buried the gardens, and the wind howled around the stone turrets of Blackwood Manor like a lost soul. But inside, for the first time in 20 years, the manor was warm. Vivian had worked miracles. In 6 weeks, she had not only balanced the ledgers, but had somehow breathed life back into the dying house. Fires roared in every grate. The servants, once sullen and unpaid, now moved with crisp efficiency, terrified of the Duchess, but fiercely loyal to her because she paid them on time. Sebastian watched all this from the sidelines, feeling like a ghost in his own home. He had spent the last month in a state of confused purgatory. He couldn't hate her, she was saving him. But he couldn't love her. She treated him with the polite, distant courtesy one might show a guest one wished would leave. "The guest list is finalized for tonight," Vivian announced at breakfast. She didn't look up from her toast. "It's Christmas Eve, Vivian," Sebastian grumbled, nursing a cup of black coffee. "Do we really need to host the entire county? I'd rather drink alone." "Isolation is what killed this estate, Sebastian," she replied coolly. "We need to show the neighbors that the Duke of Blackwood is no longer a recluse drowning in debt. We need to project power." "Power," Sebastian scoffed. "Is that all you care about?" She finally looked at him. Her blue eyes were tired. "It is the only thing that protects us." The Christmas ball was a strategic maneuver. Vivian had invited the crème de la crème of Derbyshire society, including the man Sebastian hated most in the world, Lord Archibald Archie Sterling. Archie was a snake. A wealthy industrialist with a bought title, he held the secondary mortgage on Blackwood land. He had been circling the estate like a vulture for years, waiting for Sebastian to default so he could strip the timber forests. "Why is Sterling coming?" Sebastian demanded, standing up. "He's a swine." "He is a creditor," Vivian corrected, "and tonight I intend to pay him off, publicly. It will send a message that the St. Clairs are solvent." Sebastian fell silent. He looked at his wife. She was wearing a simple morning gown, yet she looked more regal than the Queen herself. She was going to humiliate his enemy using her own money to save his name. A strange lump formed in his throat. "Vivian," he started. "Don't," she said, cutting him off. "Just be ready at 7. And Sebastian, please do not drink too much. I need you to be the Duke tonight, not the drunkard." The ball was a spectacle. The great hall was decked in holly and ivy, hundreds of beeswax candles casting a golden glow over the silks and jewels of the guests. The orchestra played waltzes and the champagne flowed. Sebastian stood at the top of the stairs waiting for his wife. When she emerged from her chambers, the chatter in the hall below ceased. She wore silver, a gown of crushed velvet that shimmered like moonlight cut low to reveal the creamy expanse of her décolletage, with diamonds, the St. Clair heirlooms she had retrieved from the pawnbroker, glittering at her throat. She didn't look like the phantom. She looked like a goddess of winter. Sebastian offered her his arm. "You look formidable," he whispered. "Good," she replied, her hand light on his sleeve. "I'm going to war." The night went exactly as Vivian planned, until the arrival of the uninvited guest. Just as dinner was being served, the heavy doors swung open. A hush fell over the room. Standing in the entrance, shaking snow from a fur cloak, was a woman with flaming red hair and a dress of scandalous emerald green. Isabella Vane. Sebastian's blood ran cold. He dropped his fork. "What is she doing here?" he hissed. Isabella strode into the room, her eyes locking onto Sebastian. She looked wild, desperate. She had not received a check in 6 weeks, and her letters to Sebastian had gone unanswered. Intercepted Sebastian realized with a jolt by Vivian. "Sebastian," Isabella cried out, her voice shrill. "You leave me to starve in London while you play house with this creature." The room erupted in gasps. Lord Stirling, sitting across the table, smirked, leaning back to enjoy the show. Sebastian stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "Isabella, leave. Now." "I will not." Isabella marched toward the head table. She looked at Vivian with pure venom. "Everyone knows the truth. He hates you. He told me so himself. He said you were a necessary evil to pay his bills. He said he'd never touch you." The silence was deafening. Every eye turned to Vivian. This was the moment the fragile reputation of the Blackwoods would shatter. A mistress crashing a Christmas ball. It was social suicide. Sebastian looked at his wife, expecting tears, expecting her to run. Vivian didn't move. She calmly picked up her wine glass, took a sip, and set it down. She looked at Isabella with an expression of mild boredom. "Miss Vane," Vivian said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried to the back of the room. "I believe you have mistaken this dining hall for the stage at the vaudeville. We do not perform theatrics here." "He loves me," Isabella screamed, pointing a gloved finger at Sebastian. Vivian turned her head slowly to look at Sebastian. "Does he?" It was a challenge, a direct question. Sebastian looked at Isabella. He saw the greed in her eyes. He saw the way she was enjoying the scene, the way she didn't care about his dignity, only her own notoriety. Then he looked at Vivian. She was sitting straight-backed, taking the arrows meant for him, protecting his house, even as he had humiliated her. Something clicked in Sebastian's chest, a bolt of clarity so sharp it hurt. He walked around the table. He didn't go to Isabella. He went to Vivian. He placed a hand on Vivian's shoulder, a gesture of possession and solidarity. He looked at the room, then at Isabella. "You are mistaken, Miss Vane," Sebastian said, his voice deep and steady. "I do not love you. I was a fool who was lost in the dark. But I have found the light." He looked down at Vivian, and for the first time his eyes were soft. "My wife is the only woman who matters in this house. You will remove yourself, or I will have the gamekeeper drag you out." Isabella's mouth fell open. She looked around, realizing she had lost. The crowd was not on her side. They were mesmerized by the Duke's defense of his Duchess. She fled the room, sobbing. Sebastian didn't watch her go. He looked at Lord Stirling. "Now, Archie, I believe we have business to discuss regarding the mortgage. My wife has a check for you. We'd like you off our land by morning." Under the table, Vivian's hand found Sebastian's. She squeezed it hard. It was the first time she had touched him voluntarily, and in that touch, Sebastian felt a jolt of electricity that was far more dangerous than any debt. January 10th, 1885. The deep winter. The victory at the Christmas ball had shifted the ground beneath them, but the wall between them remained. Sebastian had defended her, yes. But Vivian Carlyle was a woman who had learned the hard way that men's favor was fickle. She thanked him for his performance and retreated back to her ledgers. Sebastian was frustrated. He had expected something, a thawing. Instead, she seemed more guarded than ever. He began to follow her around the estate, making up excuses to be near her. He learned that she liked her tea with lemon, not milk. He learned that she read engineering manuals to understand the new irrigation systems. He learned that she was brilliant, witty, and incredibly lonely. Then the fever came. It started in the village. A nasty strain of influenza that swept through the tenant cottages. Vivian, defying Sebastian's orders, went down to the village every day with baskets of food and medicine. "It is dangerous, Vivian," Sebastian argued one morning in the hallway. "Send the servants." "They have families to protect," she argued, pulling on her gloves. "These are my people, Sebastian. If I don't look after them, who will?" "I will," he shouted. "I am the Duke." "Then come with me," she challenged. And he did. For a week, they worked side by side in the freezing cottages, delivering blankets and broth. Sebastian saw a side of her he hadn't imagined, gentle, maternal, utterly selfless. He found himself watching her not with lust, but with a terrifying kind of awe. He was falling in love with his wife. But the virus did not discriminate between peasant and peer. On the night of the 17th, Sebastian woke up shivering. His bones ached as if they were being crushed. By morning, he couldn't leave his bed. The winter fever had him. For 3 days, he drifted in and out of delirium. He burned with heat, then shook with cold. The doctors came and went, shaking their heads, speaking in hushed tones about getting affairs in order. But through the haze there was one constant, a cool hand on his forehead, a soft voice reading poetry, the smell of jasmine. Vivian never left his room. She dismissed the nurses, trusting only herself to sponge his fevered skin and force broth down his throat. She slept in the armchair by the fire, waking at his slightest groan. On the 4th night, the fever broke. Sebastian opened his eyes. The room was dim lit only by the dying embers of the fire. He felt weak, hollowed out, but clear-headed. He turned his head. Vivian was asleep in the chair, her head lolling to the side. She looked exhausted. Her hair was unpinned, cascading over her shoulders. She wore a simple dressing gown. Sebastian tried to sit up. The movement woke her instantly. "Sebastian!" She was at his side in a second, her hand flying to his forehead. "You're cool. The fever, it's gone." Her voice cracked. Tears welled up in her icy blue eyes. Tears she had never shed during the humiliation of the wedding or the stress of the debts. "You stayed," Sebastian croaked, his voice like gravel. "Of course I stayed," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "You are my husband." "I was a terrible husband," he murmured. He reached out and took her hand. This time she didn't pull away. He brought her knuckles to his lips, kissing them reverently. "Vivienne," he said, looking at her with total vulnerability. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen because I might not have the courage to say it when I am stronger." She went still. "What is it?" "I thought I was saving this house by marrying you," he said softly. "But you saved me. And it has nothing to do with the money. I don't care about the money anymore. If we lost it all tomorrow, I wouldn't care as long as you were with me." He took a breath. "I love you. Not the Duchess. Not the savior. You, the woman who argues with me about crop rotation. The woman who smells like jasmine." Vivian stared at him. For a long moment the silence stretched, and Sebastian feared he had ruined everything. Had he moved too fast? Then her face crumbled. The mask of the Iron Duchess fell away, revealing a frightened young girl. "Do not lie to me, Sebastian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can bear your indifference. I cannot bear your pity." "It isn't pity," he said fiercely, pulling her hand against his chest so she could feel his heart beating. "Look at me. Am I lying?" She searched his face. She saw the sweat on his brow, the desperation in his eyes, the naked truth of it. "Everyone leaves," she admitted, a tear escaping. "My mother. My father in his own way. The world decided I was unlovable before they even saw my face." "The world is blind," Sebastian said. "I was blind. But I see you now." He shifted, making room on the bed. "Stay with me. Not as a nurse, as my wife." Vivian hesitated for a heartbeat. Then she climbed into the bed beside him. She rested her head on his shoulder, her body fitting against his as if she had been made for that space. Sebastian wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair. As the snow fell silently outside, burying the world in white, the wall between the Duke and Duchess finally crumbled into dust. But peace in the world of the aristocracy is rarely allowed to last. Just as Sebastian drifted off to sleep, holding his world in his arms, a rider was galloping toward Blackwood Manor through the storm. He carried a letter from London, a letter from the Earl of Carlisle's solicitor. The Earl was dead, and with his death, a secret was about to be revealed, a clause in the will that threatened to undo everything Vivian had built and rip her away from the man she had just learned to trust. January 12th, 1885. The morning after. The peace of the morning was shattered, not by the storm outside, but by the heavy thud of the brass knocker on the front door. Sebastian and Vivian were at breakfast. The intimacy of the previous night still hung in the air between them, a shy, tender silence. Sebastian was buttering a scone, unable to stop glancing at his wife. She looked softer today, the tension that usually held her spine rigid having relaxed. "Henderson," Sebastian called out as the butler entered, looking pale. "Who is it in this weather?" "It is Lord Carlisle." "Your Grace," Henderson stammered. Vivian froze her teacup, rattling against the saucer. "My father. He never travels in winter." "No, Your Grace," Henderson said, his voice dropping. "It is the new Lord Carlisle, Mr. Thomas Miller. Or rather, the Earl now." Vivian's face drained of blood. She set the cup down. "Thomas, my cousin." "Your father?" Sebastian asked, gently reaching for her hand. "Dead," she whispered. "If Thomas is here, my father is dead." She looked up, fear flashing in her eyes, a fear Sebastian didn't understand. "Sebastian, you must be careful. Thomas is not... he is not a good man." The doors to the dining hall swung open. Thomas Miller, the new Earl of Carlisle, strode in. He was a man of 40, with a face that was handsome in a rudimentary way, but spoiled by a mouth that curled perpetually into a sneer. He was shaking snow from a heavy fur coat, flanked by 2 grim-looking solicitors. "Cousin Vivian," Thomas boomed, ignoring the servants. "And the Duke. My deepest condolences on the loss of my uncle. I assume the news hadn't reached you." "Get out of my house," Sebastian said, standing up slowly. "You enter unannounced, disrespecting my wife's grief." "Grief?" Thomas laughed, pulling off his gloves. "I doubt Vivian is grieving. She hated the old man. With good reason, I suppose, given how he locked her away." Thomas walked to the table, picking up an apple and biting into it with a crunch. "I am here on business, Blackwood. The funeral is Tuesday, but I couldn't wait. We have a problem with the estate." "The dowry is paid," Sebastian said, stepping in front of Vivian. "The contract is signed." "Ah, yes. The £50,000, Thomas said, chewing. "A magnificent sum. Unfortunately, it was authorized by a man who was in his final years, mentally infirm." One of the solicitors stepped forward, holding a document. "We have petitioned the Court of Chancery, Your Grace. We have affidavits from the late Earl's physicians, stating he was not of sound mind when he arranged this marriage. Therefore, the dowry is invalid. We are recalling the funds." Sebastian felt the floor lurch. "You can't. The money is spent. It's in the roof, the farms, the debts." "Then we will take the collateral," Thomas said, his eyes gleaming. "Blackwood Manor." "Over my dead body," Sebastian snarled. "There is an alternative," Thomas said, his voice turning oily. He looked past Sebastian at Vivian. "The court might be lenient if we can prove that the marriage itself is invalid. You see, Uncle always claimed poor Vivian was troubled. That's why she was hidden. The phantom, wasn't it? A madness that disfigured her mind, if not her face." Thomas took a step closer. "Annul the marriage, Sebastian. Sign a paper stating you were duped into marrying a lunatic. Return her to my custody. I'll place her in a very comfortable sanatorium in Switzerland. In exchange, you keep the dowry. You keep the manor. You go back to your whores and your whiskey debt-free." The room went silent. The fire crackled. Vivian stood up. She was trembling. "You want to lock me away," she whispered, "just like he did. You want control of my trust fund." "It's for your own good, dear," Thomas sneered. "You're hysterical. Look at you." He turned to Sebastian. "Well, Duke, it's a simple choice. The woman or the wealth. You married her for the money anyway. I'm offering you a chance to keep the money and lose the burden." Sebastian looked at Thomas. Then he looked at the solicitors. Then he turned to Vivian. She was looking at him with wide, terrified eyes. She was waiting for him to do the pragmatic thing. She was waiting for the Duke who sold his name to sell his wife. Sebastian turned back to Thomas. His face was unreadable. "You are right, Thomas," Sebastian said softly. "I did marry her for the money." Thomas smirked. "I knew you were a sensible man." "But," Sebastian continued, his voice rising, "I found something else." Sebastian moved so fast, Thomas didn't have time to flinch. He grabbed the new Earl by the lapels of his expensive coat and slammed him backward into the dining table. China shattered. Silverware clattered to the floor. "She is not a burden," Sebastian roared, his face inches from Thomas's. "She is the Duchess of Blackwood, and if you ever suggest I trade her for a pile of bricks again, I will kill you where you stand." He shoved Thomas away. The Earl stumbled, falling onto the rug. "Get out," Sebastian commanded, pointing to the door. "Sue me. Take the house. Take the land. I don't give a damn. But you will not take my wife." Thomas scrambled up, red-faced and furious. "You're a fool, St. Clair. You'll be destitute by the end of the month. I'll strip this place to the bones." "Let him try," Vivian said. Her voice cut through the chaos. She walked around the table. She wasn't trembling anymore. She looked at her cousin with cold, aristocratic disdain. "You forgot one thing, Thomas," she said. "Uncle Arthur." Thomas froze. "What?" "My mother's brother," Vivian said calmly. "The one you and father thought died in India. I have been writing to him for years. He is a barrister on the High Court now, and he holds the original copy of my mother's marriage settlement." She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small key. "The dowry money didn't come from the Carlisle estate, Thomas. It came from my mother's inheritance. It was never my father's to give, and it is certainly not yours to take back. It belongs to me." Thomas stared at her. You lie. "Get out of my house." Vivian repeated, her voice matching Sebastian's in power. "Before I have the Duke throw you out the window." Thomas looked from the furious Duke to the icy Duchess. He realized with a sinking stomach that he had walked into a lion's den. He signaled his solicitors, and they retreated, tails between their legs, out into the snow. February 14th, 1885. Valentine's Day. The legal battle with Thomas lasted 3 weeks, but with Vivian's documentation and Sebastian's newfound ferocity in defense of his estate, the new Earl's case crumbled. The threat of Blackwood Manor being sold was gone forever. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was Valentine's Day. The snow was finally melting, revealing the green shoots of crocuses in the Blackwood gardens. Sebastian found Vivian in the conservatory. She was pruning a rose bush, the sunlight catching the gold ring on her finger. "You know," Sebastian said, leaning against the doorframe, "we never had a proper honeymoon." Vivian looked up, smiling. It was a genuine smile now, one that reached her eyes. "We had a fever and a lawsuit. That's very modern, isn't it?" "I was thinking," Sebastian said, walking over to her. He took the shears from her hand and set them down. "Italy, Lake Como. We can leave next week. I hear the villas are beautiful in the spring. Can we afford it?" she asked, her eyebrow arching in that familiar auditing way. "I sold my racehorses," Sebastian said casually, "and I cancelled my membership at White's. It turns out I don't need them." Vivian looked at him surprised. "You loved those horses?" "I love you more," he said, and he meant it. The urge to gamble, the need for the noise of the club, it had all faded. The adrenaline he used to chase at the card table, he now found in making her laugh, in running the estate by her side. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I also got you something. Since I botched the first ring ceremony." He opened the box. Inside wasn't a diamond or a sapphire. It was a ring of twisted gold, set with a small, unique stone, a moonstone. "It's not the most expensive gem," Sebastian explained nervously, "but they say it protects travelers at night, and it represents new beginnings." Vivian looked at the ring. Then she looked at the man who had once dreaded the sight of her, the man who had expected a monster and found a partner. "It's perfect," she whispered. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I'm sorry about the veil," Sebastian said quietly, looking down at her hand. for making you feel you had to hide. Vivian reached up and cupped his face. The veil is gone, Sebastian. You lifted it. No. He shook his head, leaning his forehead against hers. You did. You lifted mine. I was the one hiding from responsibility, from love, from myself. You saw me when I was invisible. He kissed her. It wasn't the tentative kiss of the altar, nor the desperate kiss of the fever. It was a kiss of deep, abiding passion, a kiss between equals. Outside, the sun broke fully through the clouds, flooding the manor with light. The phantom of Derbyshire was gone. In her place stood the Duchess of Blackwood in the arms of the husband who adored her. They had started with a lie bound by a contract of gold and greed. But in the fires of scandal and sickness, they had forged something far more valuable. They had become real. And as Sebastian pulled her closer, he knew that this was the only fortune he would ever need. And so the Duke and his phantom didn't just survive. They thrived. Sebastian St. Clair and Vivian Carlyle became legends in Derbyshire, not for the scandals, but for their inseparable partnership. They proved that while beauty may catch the eye, it is courage, loyalty, and the willingness to fight for one another that captures the soul. They walked through the fire of judgment and greed and came out holding hands. If this story of redemption, twists, and true love moved you, please take a second to hit that like button. It helps us bring more stories like this to life. Don't forget to share this with a friend who loves a good historical romance, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a saga. What would you have done in Vivian's shoes? Would you have forgiven Sebastian? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep the romance alive.